Um, Taoiseach, you began by speaking about youth unemployment being discussed at the OECD meeting, but you didn't outline if any concrete proposals came from the OECD regarding the scandal of the extent of youth unemployment throughout the European Union, and particularly in the so-called peripheral states, the victims of austerity, where up to half young people available for work are unemployed. So can you outline if, apart from platitudes by the European establishment or the OECD establishment, there were any proposals for concrete investment in those societies that would lead to young people finding meaningful work and a decent future, which the current system doesn't give them. In that regard, Taoiseach, and it also relates to the corporation tax issue, I don't know if you read the international financial press, but there have been articles over the past period about the massive extent of accumulated profits by major corporations that lie in banks and financial institutions around the world. And in the case of Europe, for example, an estimated €3 trillion by European corporations within the European Union, not invested, but running around the banking system, because those corporations judge that it's not sufficiently profitable for them to invest in infrastructure or in new employment and new jobs. Now, doesn't that really beg the question that a different and a new tax regime is needed, not just in this country, but throughout Europe, and that those companies should be taxed at a much higher rate, so that those funds which are already, which are in any case earned by hand and by brain of working people around Europe, those funds should be available for public investment, for example, in infrastructure and major infrastructural projects which are desperately needed in every country in Europe, that would put literally millions of people to work. And isn't that a crying condemnation of the type of corporate tax regime that you, Taoiseach, and your government insist on keeping in this country, where the headline rate here is itself among the lowest in the European Union, but nobody believes you, Taoiseach, that the headline rate, or nobody believes that institution of paid advisors, that it's the effective rate is 11.9%. Everybody knows that there is a huge tax scam going on in this country as far as major corporations are concerned. And it's quite clear from the various estimates. We don't even need to agree perhaps with Professor Stewart of Trinity College, who put it at between 2 and 3%. Social Justice Ireland, 6.2%. If we're generous and say that the effective corporate tax rate is 8%, based on 2012 figures, every percentage extra they would pay would be 525 million. So if they pay the full rate of 12.5%, even that, which is a derisory amount, to be honest, would be 2 billion extra. Now, Taoiseach, can you not agree that in an Ireland that is crucified by austerity, where our people are hurting badly through massive extra taxation, through your property tax, your projected water tax, etc., that these funds should be taxed and the corporations should be made to pay in relation to the present situation. And I just put it to you that your position in blankly denying, number one, the 12.5% is adequate as a headline rate, and number two, that the corporations here play just about this rate, is completely unsustainable. And lastly, don't you understand that an increasing subject of discussion, debate and controversy around the world, but particularly in Europe and very particularly in the United States now, is the massive and growing inequality between the tiny percentage at the top, the tiny elite of 1 to 5% of populations that continue to accumulate, even in the era of austerity as far as Europe and Ireland is concerned, massive wealth, while ordinary people suffer, and society suffers, and services suffer. Would it ever dawn on you, Taoiseach, that you should go into the fora in the European Union and point these issues out, rather than being part of the current establishment thinking and regime, which is hugely destructive of society, and which is giving rise to massive and growing inequality, and is actually criminal? Do you see no responsibility for the Irish government there?
I want to thank Deputy Higgins for his comments, and also for, I understand that you are going to be a member of the Oireachtas committee dealing with the banking inquiry, and that will bring colour and influence and power to that committee, and I wish you the very best with it in your independence with the other members, Deputy Higgins. The question of youth, the question of youth employment, with no problem in that. The question of youth employment is one that was discussed at the meeting with the OECD personnel, and the details of this have been considered at length by the Minister for Education and Skills and by the Minister for Social Protection. The OECD was critical of the government regarding the lack of action in relation to labour activation measures, as they call them. The EU and the IMF criticised us to some extent in this regard also. But by and large, international organisations have been very supportive of the approach taken by the government to reduce unemployment and to boost job creation. And we always welcome advice and ideas and recommendations on how we might improve our performance in that context. The Pathways to Work programme will remain a central feature of government's jobs drive in 2014. And the OECD input will have an important role as we refine that and look at it for the future. The OECD was commissioned back in late 2013, Deputy Higgins, to provide a commentary on Irish youth employment policies and to advise on the implementation of the EU recommendation about a youth guarantee for employment. That work was completed at the end of 2013 and was a helpful input into drawing up the Youth Guarantee Implementation Plan, which was approved by government and published in January of this year. The OECD also regularly advises on aspects of Irish labour market policy, as was the case in its Economic Survey of Ireland published last year, and most recently in their review of the Action Plan for Jobs. And in that review, the OECD were positive in their assessment of labour market reforms, but they concluded that more needed to be done. Nothing new about that. This is a view that's shared by the government. It's evidenced by the additional measures being taken under Pathways to Work 2013. And these include the extension of activation to those who are long-term unemployed, and the continuing reallocation of staff to frontline activation work. In other words, 300 additional case officers were put in place in late 2013. All elements of that programme, Pathways to Work, will be reviewed, and if necessary, they'll be augmented and refined in Pathways to Work 2014, which is due around the middle of the year. Now, I've dealt with the question in the detail of it before, Deputy Higgins, about the effective rate of corporation tax here, down to 11.9. And obviously, you have estimated evidence to the contrary, and we've discussed that before. But the ones that really count do put Ireland's effective tax rate at approximately 11.9%. which is very close to the 12.5. Depends on the statistics, obviously, that you use. Like, I think it is important to say that we're a small but important entity in a very big world here, where different jurisdictions, different regimes, different rates of tax apply, and many companies are involved in multi-country situations. And that's why Ireland has been up front in recognising that we need to deal with this in a fair and equitable fashion. And that's why we contribute to the 15 sectoral committees that the OECD is working at. And that's why we're very happy to defend the Commission investigation into a specific technical issue about a specific company. Obviously, Deputy Higgins, I think it's fair to say there's a great deal of international finance sloshing around in the system, much of which is available for investment. One of the problems about Ireland is that it's never actually produced the range of projects to draw sufficient funds for investment for infrastructure or whatever. Also, I was glad to see Minister Howlin and Minister Noonan be in a position to put together significant packages for investment through stimulus, be it for road development or bundles of schools or the Grange Gorman development in Dublin city centre. And these major investment requirements that I think are able to draw on much of or elements of that finance that is out there. So where we are really is continuing to maintain our corporate tax rate, to deal robustly with the Commission investigation here, to work upfront and very comprehensively with the OECD and other countries. And I might say to you that at the European Council meeting where this was agreed last year, there was agreement from everybody, even countries that were very silent on this in the past, that there needs to be an international response to the issue of tax regimes, different countries and different rates that apply. The projections for Ireland over the next period are interesting. For instance, in the unemployment rate to go from 2013 down to 11.5 in 2014, 10.5 in 2015, 9.7 in 2016, and down to 8% by 2018. That's in keeping with the medium-term economic strategy that the government published when we exited the programme of assistance there last end of year. So we have our projections for growth and for GDP, GNP, all set out in that economic programme up to 2018. I think the emphasis this year, Deputy Higgins, is on construction, on services and on retail, and the efforts now being made by government to put together a really exciting programme in respect of the construction sector dealing with housing, social housing, other infrastructure. I hope I will bring about significant job creation results for people who are either on the unemployment register and who were involved in various aspects of the construction sector over the last number of years, or for those who come with new skills and new ways of dealing with this. So that's all part of the if you like, the fabric of where government are working to create more jobs, increase income, continue to grow and strengthen our economy, so that it make it easier for the Minister for Finance to meet the targets that we've set ourselves of 3% reduction below 3% by 2015, elimination by 2018. And I don't accept the Independent Fiscal Council's assertion this morning that the rate of projection that we have is faster than the EU. We set out our targets in that medium economic plan, and we expect to be able to adhere to them.